The hum of the helicopter's blades cut through the early evening air, scattering dust and debris across the barren tarmac. Soldiers lined the perimeter of the U.S. Special Operations Base, eyes squinting at the approaching figure descending from the ramp. She moved with quiet authority, a shadow among shadows, black tactical gear molded perfectly to her frame. Even before landing, she exuded an aura that silenced chatter and drew 100 pairs of eyes. No one called her by name. No one knew her story. All they knew was that she had arrived and that she was different. Her boots touched the ground lightly, barely disturbing the gravel beneath them. A gust of wind tugged at her hair, and yet she seemed entirely unbothered, her gaze sharp and calculating. Every movement was deliberate, measured, controlled. It was as if the air itself bent to accommodate her presence. Some of the men shifted uneasily, exchanging glances that were half curiosity, half apprehension. Here was someone who clearly belonged to a world they had only heard whispers about, a world of high-risk operations, classified missions, and legends that weren't officially recorded. She didn't rush. She didn't speak. She simply walked, each step purposeful, her eyes sweeping across the base's perimeter. Soldiers noticed the subtle things, the way her fingers hovered near the seams of her jacket, the way her posture was simultaneously relaxed and alert. She carried nothing ostentatious. No name tags, no visible insignia, just an aura of capability that made seasoned operatives instinctively respect her space. A few of them whispered under their breath, recounting rumors, missions that never officially happened, enemies neutralized without a trace, intelligence coups that existed only in classified reports. The commanding officer, a grizzled man who had seen dozens of operatives come and go, studied her carefully. He had learned over decades that appearances could deceive, that arrogance often preceded failure. But something about her, something intangible, set her apart. There was no arrogance in her posture, only quiet confidence. And yet, beneath that calm exterior, he could sense a lethal intensity that made his pulse quicken despite himself. This was not someone you tested lightly. This was someone you observed, with caution. She reached the briefing hall, moving past rows of neatly arranged vehicles and tents. Each step was silent, precise, and despite the soft clatter of her boots on the gravel, she seemed to glide rather than walk. Young recruits glanced at her nervously, whispering to each other in tones meant to be discreet, but she ignored them completely. Her attention was already scanning the environment, exit points, vantage locations, possible threats. She treated the base like an adversary to be studied, a puzzle to be solved, before she even met its inhabitants. When the helicopter's ramp fully retracted, a low hum of conversation spread through the crowd of onlookers. Soldiers shifted, uncertain of protocol, unsure how to address someone who carried the unspoken authority of experience. Then came the question. Someone from the team finally stepped forward, a mixture of curiosity and professional etiquette in his voice. "Ma'am, your name?" She paused, turning her head slightly. Her eyes were dark, deep, and unflinching. For a long moment, she said nothing. The air seemed to thicken around her, almost as if time had slowed in deference to her presence. Then, almost in a whisper, she answered, "Call me Dark Angel." The words were soft, but they carried a weight that made every ear in the vicinity prick up. The name wasn't boastful. It wasn't dramatic. It was a statement, simple, precise, and utterly unforgettable. The whisper seemed to linger, echoing against the walls of the briefing hall. Soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, some unsure whether to laugh nervously, others unwilling to break eye contact. No one asked further questions. Who she was, what she had done, where she had come from, none of it mattered in that moment. A call sign was enough. As she walked past them, she didn't smile. She didn't nod. Her presence alone was acknowledgement enough. Some of the younger operatives tried to match her pace, eager to follow, eager to glean some fragment of her aura, but it was hopeless. She moved through the crowd like a phantom, always one step ahead, always just out of reach. The commanding officer watched from a distance, silently noting the reactions of his men. A rare few of them, hardened by years of combat and classified operations, seemed genuinely unsettled. They had never seen anyone move with such deliberate control, with such quiet dominance over the room. She paused briefly near a tactical operations board, her eyes scanning the maps and intel pinned to the wall. Fingers hovered over the surface, as if weighing each variable, calculating probabilities at lightning speed. She didn't speak, but her body language conveyed a message clearer than any words. She understood the mission before anyone even explained it. Her mind worked in layers, anticipating threats, identifying opportunities, calculating risks with cold precision. Observers realized they were witnessing the kind of intelligence that wasn't taught in training manuals. It was honed in real danger, tempered by experience most could only imagine. Then, without warning, she turned and walked toward the staging area for vehicles. Her movements remained calm, unhurried, yet every soldier in the vicinity felt the subtle pressure of her presence, a tension that suggested she could turn any situation lethal in seconds. The dust kicked up by her passage seemed to settle instantly, as if the world itself acknowledged her authority. She didn't acknowledge anyone directly, yet every eye in the base followed her path. Whispers broke out again. "Who is she?" One soldier murmured. "No one knows. And I don't think anyone ever will," another replied, his voice low. She reached the vehicles, crouched briefly, checking a rifle, adjusting her gear, and examining the layout as if she had memorized it in seconds. Then, with a calm efficiency, she loaded the vehicle silently, checking equipment, scanning surroundings, and moving through her checklist faster than anyone had thought possible. Observers couldn't decide what unnerved them more, her speed, her accuracy, or the unshakable composure she displayed under scrutiny. By the time she was ready, the sun had dipped further behind the horizon, casting long shadows across the base. The atmosphere was tense, filled with a mixture of awe and apprehension. This was no ordinary operative. This was a force that moved quietly, lethally, and with perfect control over everything in her vicinity. And as she climbed into the vehicle, fastening her harness and adjusting her headset, she didn't glance back. She didn't need to. She had already made her presence known. The whispers continued after she disappeared from sight, lingering in the minds of every operative at the base. "Dark Angel," they repeated under their breaths. The name felt like a warning, a promise, and a riddle all at once. Some swore that she moved too fast, that she blended too well with shadows, that she seemed almost untouchable. And in that quiet, tense moment, everyone understood the unspoken truth. The mission, whatever it would be, had changed the instant she arrived. The commanding officer exhaled slowly, shaking his head in disbelief. "I don't know who she is," he muttered to himself, "but I have a feeling we're about to find out." And somewhere, in the distance beyond the base, the wind seemed to carry her presence, a phantom in the night, silent, deadly, unforgettable. The briefing room smelled faintly of gun oil and stale coffee, a scent that had become synonymous with tension and late-night operations. Rows of special ops operatives sat rigidly in their seats, eyes trained on the large digital map projected against the wall. The room buzzed with quiet murmurs, though everyone remained acutely aware of the new arrival, who had silently taken a seat at the far side of the table. She didn't introduce herself. She didn't ask questions. She simply folded her hands, eyes narrowing as she scanned the detailed layout of the mission zone. The commanding officer, Colonel Marcus Hayes, cleared his throat and adjusted the microphone clipped to his uniform. "We've received intelligence of a rogue faction that's obtained a small cache of nuclear-grade explosives," he said, voice steady but low. "Our objective is to infiltrate the facility, recover or neutralize the weapons, and extract all personnel safely. This operation will require precision, stealth, and timing. Failure is not an option." The room went quiet, tension palpable like a coiled spring. She leaned forward slightly, resting her elbows on the table, eyes darting across the schematics. Every doorway, every ventilation shaft, every guard rotation, every camera placement seemed to register instantly in her mind. She didn't speak immediately. Instead, her fingers traced an invisible path along the map, almost unconsciously calculating angles, distances, and trajectories. The young operatives exchanged glances, nervously clearing their throats. Some of them had trained for years, preparing for high-risk missions like this, yet the quiet authority of this woman unsettled them. There was no hesitation, no panic in her demeanor. Her calm focus made the room feel smaller, as if every detail of the mission and every person present were under her subtle control. Colonel Hayes, sensing the curiosity, finally broke the silence. "You'll need to lead the infiltration team," he said, glancing at her. "Do you accept?" Without hesitation, she lifted her gaze, meeting his eyes directly. Her voice was calm, soft, but carried an intensity that caused a ripple of unease through the room. "I'll lead," she said. That was it, 2 words, precise, deliberate, leaving no room for debate. The commanding officer felt an unexpected chill. He had seen many operatives step forward over the years, but few commanded such immediate authority with such economy of words. The team began discussing approaches, debating potential points of entry and the timing of the operation. Their voices overlapped in rapid-fire sequences, tactical jargon filling the room like static. But she didn't interrupt. She listened, absorbing every plan, every risk, every hesitation. Then, after a few minutes of observing, she began speaking. "Entry point B is compromised," she said softly. "Cameras are active and guards rotate every 12 minutes, not 15. The ventilation shaft at Sector 4 is structurally compromised. It will collapse if we use it as a route. Approach through the east wall at 0200 hours. Guards in Sector 6 can be distracted with a timed smoke device, giving you an uninterrupted 3-minute window to reach the control room." The room went still. Some of the younger soldiers whispered incredulously to each other. How could she know such precise details? Had she already been inside the facility? Colonel Hayes raised an eyebrow, intrigued but cautious. "How did you determine this?" he asked, his voice betraying his curiosity. Her reply was simple, almost cryptic. "I've been where you haven't. I've seen what you can't imagine." She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. Her calm assurance spoke louder than words. The officers and soldiers alike began to sense that she wasn't just giving a suggestion. She was delivering a calculated directive, born of experience far beyond their comprehension. As the room absorbed her instructions, a young operative dared to challenge her. "Ma'am, that's extremely risky. We could lose men if something goes wrong." He tried to maintain authority in his tone, though the tremor betrayed his unease. She tilted her head slightly, lips barely moving as she replied, "Risk is inevitable in operations like this. The difference is whether you control it, or it controls you. Follow my lead, and we mitigate it." Her gaze swept the room, landing briefly on each member of the team. Every eye met hers, feeling the subtle weight of command. The room seemed to shrink under her presence, and for the first time, the team realized that the mission would no longer be about collective debate. It would be about precision, discipline, and trusting someone who appeared to exist almost entirely outside conventional bounds. She leaned back slightly, scanning the rest of the projected intel. Small details emerged in her eyes. A weak link in the facility's perimeter fence. A hidden guard route used for internal communication. A blind spot in security camera rotations. Each observation was noted silently, her mind weaving together a web of probabilities and contingencies. When she finally spoke again, her voice was measured, almost hypnotic. The window for insertion is small. Extraction is even smaller. Timing is everything. Hesitation will cost lives. Follow my sequence, stay alert, and trust the plan. Even the veterans in the room found themselves nodding, despite some initial skepticism. There was something in her presence, in the way she analyzed, calculated, and delivered her directives that inspired instinctive trust, even when rationally they didn't know why. Colonel Hayes stepped closer, lowering his voice. We've had highly trained operatives top tier in every metric. No one has delivered intel this precise or made decisions this uncheckable. Her expression remained unreadable. I don't make mistakes. I don't rely on luck. I rely on experience and preparation. The mission will proceed as planned, or it will not proceed at all. The room was silent for a moment, every operative aware that they were in the presence of someone who existed outside their usual parameters of risk and skill. There was no arrogance, no show of force, just an almost terrifying certainty. Young recruits felt their hearts race, not from fear alone, but from the realization that they were witnessing someone exceptional, someone who had been forged in trials that were impossible to imagine. The final moment of the briefing arrived. She stood abruptly, moving to the center of the room. We leave at 02:00 hours. Prepare yourselves. Rest now, because the night will demand everything you have and everything you are willing to risk. I will be leading this operation, and I expect absolute focus and discipline. Her eyes scanned the room one last time, and even the most skeptical operatives felt an almost magnetic pull toward her authority. As the team filed out, whispers followed in her wake. Who is she? One soldier asked. I don't know, another replied, voice low. But I think we're about to find out why she's called Dark Angel. Colonel Hayes remained seated, watching her return quietly to her corner. Something about the way she exuded calm while projecting lethal intent made him uneasy, and yet he couldn't deny it. She had just reshaped the mission in a single briefing. Every operative, from the newest recruit to the most seasoned veteran, now knew one thing for certain. This operation would be unlike any they had ever undertaken. And the person at the center of it, the one quietly commanding their respect and attention, was a figure of almost mythic precision, whose reputation would only grow once the mission began. Hours passed, and the base settled into an uneasy quiet. Soldiers prepped their gear, checked weapons, and reviewed intel. But even as they did, all eyes occasionally flicked toward her. She moved silently among them, inspecting equipment, reviewing checklists, and making subtle adjustments that somehow enhanced efficiency. No one knew how she anticipated every need before it arose, yet every movement she made reduced the likelihood of failure. By the time the first moonlight hit the base perimeter, it was clear. The mission was no longer just an assignment. It had become a test of trust, courage, and reliance on someone who defied explanation. Dark Angel, with her whispered call sign and almost supernatural composure, had entered their world, and no one would ever forget it. The first rays of dawn had barely broken over the rugged terrain surrounding the base when the team was called to the training compound. The area had been transformed into a grueling obstacle course, designed to push operatives to their absolute limits, physical, mental, and strategic. The usual exercises involved high-speed navigation, tactical maneuvers, simulated combat, and intelligence gathering under extreme stress. But today, there was an unspoken tension in the air. Everyone knew this was more than a routine test. It was a measure of Dark Angel's capabilities, the true reason for her arrival. The operatives lined up, muscles taut, weapons ready, eyes scanning the course with a mixture of anticipation and unease. Some had been through every training program imaginable, from desert operations to urban warfare simulations. But a strange hush fell over the compound as she appeared at the starting point. Dark Angel's movements were fluid, almost unnatural. She adjusted her gear in a single, precise motion, surveying the obstacles with an intensity that made even the most experienced soldiers instinctively step back. Colonel Hayes stepped forward, clipboard in hand, observing the reactions of his team. "This is a standard special ops assessment," he announced. "Navigate the course. Neutralize threats. Gather intel. Precision is key. Failures will be noted. You know the drill." Everyone understood the protocol. Yet, when Dark Angel stepped forward, she didn't look at the obstacles with the same calculation as the others. Instead, she seemed to absorb the environment, like a predator reading the movement of its prey. Her gaze flicked from cameras to simulated guards to the uneven terrain, cataloging every variable in seconds. No one could tell if she was nervous. She wasn't. She moved with absolute certainty, like she had done this countless times before, and perhaps in some sense she had. The whistle blew, and the team surged forward. Soldiers vaulted over walls, scrambled through mud pits, crawled under barbed wire, and ducked beneath simulated gunfire. Many stumbled, misjudging distances or overestimating their stamina. Panic flickered in the eyes of some as alarms rang out. Smoke filled the course, and mechanical enemies moved in unpredictable patterns. Dark Angel, however, flowed through the chaos with a precision that made it seem almost choreographed. She vaulted over walls as if gravity worked differently for her, sliding under barbed wire without a single scrape. When smoke obscured the path, she navigated by touch and intuition, neutralizing automated threats with pinpoint accuracy. Where her teammates hesitated, she advanced, her decisions instantaneous, flawless. She moved as if she were not just trained, but instinctively aware of every possible scenario before it unfolded. The first real test came in the form of a simulated hostage rescue. 2 mannequins stood in a room rigged with motion sensors and alarms. The usual approach would have involved careful coordination, but Dark Angel's method was different. She slipped into the room silently, scanning and disarming sensors with subtle hand movements that seemed almost like magic. By the time alarms would have been triggered, she had already secured the hostages, exited the room, and positioned herself for the next threat. Her teammates watched, mouths slightly open, realizing that she was operating on a completely different plane of skill. Colonel Hayes furrowed his brow. He had trained countless elite operatives, yet he had never seen someone perform with this level of intuition. Every step Dark Angel took was calculated, precise, and lethal in its efficiency. Even mistakes made by the coarse deliberate traps designed to trip the most skilled were anticipated and neutralized before they could pose a problem. The course's final segment involved a simulated urban raid with narrow corridors, hidden threats, and timed explosives. The clock was merciless, ticking down to failure if operatives hesitated. Many of her teammates moved cautiously, scanning for threats, checking corners, calculating angles. Dark Angel didn't pause. She slipped through the corridors, neutralizing threats with silent precision, securing the target, and guiding her team seamlessly through hazards they hadn't even noticed. She moved with a rhythm that was both unnerving and awe-inspiring, a perfect blend of speed, strategy, and instinct. At one point, a young operative tried to intercept her, thinking he could match her pace. He stumbled, nearly falling over a simulated explosive. Dark Angel glanced at him briefly, her eyes cold but not unkind. She adjusted his path with a subtle nod and a hand on his shoulder, redirecting him without slowing her momentum. In that instant, it became clear to everyone watching that she wasn't just performing for herself, she was leading. guiding and elevating the capabilities of those around her, even while making it look effortless. By the time she reached the final checkpoint, the sun had risen fully, casting long shadows across the compound. The other operatives were exhausted, sweat streaming down their faces, hearts pounding. Many had faltered, their confidence shaken by the realization that no training they had received had prepared them for someone like her. Dark Angel, by contrast, emerged unscathed, poised, and entirely composed. Her breathing was even. Her movements showed no strain. Her eyes, however, hinted at a depth of focus that was almost terrifying in its intensity. Colonel Hayes approached her cautiously, clipboard in hand, scribbling notes, though the words seemed inadequate to capture what he had witnessed. You completed the course flawlessly," he said, voice low. "Every metric exceeded expectations. You anticipated every threat before it happened. How?" His voice trailed off, leaving the question unfinished. Dark Angel didn't answer immediately. She glanced at the team, their faces a mixture of awe, disbelief, and quiet fear. "I didn't complete it for the metrics," she said finally. "I completed it to show what's necessary to survive. Precision is not optional. Awareness is not optional. The mission will demand more than you think. This course is only a fraction of what's coming." Her words hung in the air, leaving the team silent. Even seasoned operatives felt the weight of her statement. They had believed themselves prepared for anything, yet in her presence, they realized how much they had underestimated the scale of what true preparedness meant. A young recruit, barely out of basic training, asked nervously, "Ma'am, how do you know all this?" Her eyes softened for a fraction of a second, almost imperceptibly, before the cold focus returned. "Experience," she said simply, "and paying attention when others overlook the details that matter most. Fear is a tool. Hesitation is a weapon. Understand both, and you survive. Ignore either, and you don't." The whistle sounded again, signaling the end of the test. Other operatives filed past her, exhausted and humbled, some nodding respectfully, others staring in disbelief. They had witnessed something extraordinary, a demonstration of skill, precision, and calm focus that transcended ordinary human capability. Colonel Hayes finally broke the silence. "I've seen many operatives in my career," he said, voice low, carrying both awe and unease. "But never like this. Who are you?" She gave him a faint smile, one that didn't reach her eyes, but carried quiet authority. "I told you," she said, almost a whisper. "Call me Dark Angel." The room was silent. Even the most skeptical operatives felt a shiver, a recognition that this wasn't a person to underestimate. She had passed the test not just with skill, but with an unspoken lesson. Survival, precision, and instinct were inseparable. The team would follow her, whether they understood her fully or not. As the operatives left the course to recover and prep for the upcoming mission, the legend of Dark Angel began to solidify. Stories of her flawless performance would spread quickly, whispered in the corridors, echoed in barracks, and replayed in the minds of those who had witnessed her skill. By the end of the day, everyone knew one undeniable truth. This mission, and every mission after, would never be the same with her at the helm. And somewhere, just beyond the compound, the wind seemed to carry a quiet echo of her presence, a shadow moving through the early morning light, poised, deadly, and impossible to forget. The base was quieter than usual as the team settled into their barracks for a brief rest before the mission. Shadows from the setting sun stretched long across the compound, casting an eerie glow on the rows of vehicles and equipment. Yet, despite the calm, there was an undercurrent of tension. Operatives moved about with practiced efficiency, checking gear, reviewing intel, and whispering quietly about what they had witnessed during the test earlier that day. One topic dominated every conversation: Dark Angel. Her presence lingered like smoke in the minds of those who had watched her navigate the course. It wasn't just her skill, it was the calm certainty, the unshakable focus, the way she seemed to anticipate every obstacle before it existed. Even seasoned operatives, those who had survived years in the field, found themselves whispering in awe and unease. Who is she really? One asked. No one knew. And yet rumors began to surface. Stories of her past, carefully guarded but never fully concealed, trickled through the ranks like fragments of a puzzle. Some spoke of missions that didn't officially exist, operations so secretive that the government denied their very occurrence. Others whispered of enemies neutralized before they could even react, intelligence gathered from impossible circumstances, and disappearances orchestrated with perfect precision. Dark Angel, they realized, wasn't just skilled. She was a ghost in every sense of the word, a shadow that moved unseen, leaving only results behind. She didn't participate in the chatter. She moved among the barracks silently, inspecting equipment, adjusting gear, and observing the team with her usual calm intensity. Her gaze swept the room with meticulous precision, as if cataloging each individual's strengths, weaknesses, and potential for the upcoming operation. Yet, there was something in her eyes that hinted at a deeper story: pain, loss, and a relentless drive that went beyond duty. One of the younger operatives, barely out of basic training, tried to strike up a conversation. "Mom, how did you get so good at all of this?" His voice trembled slightly, betraying both fear and curiosity. She paused, her eyes meeting his for the briefest moment. There was a shadow in her expression, fleeting and almost imperceptible, before the cold focus returned. "Experience," she said simply. "Pain teaches you faster than training ever could. Loss sharpens your instincts. And failure. Failure is a luxury you cannot afford in this line of work." Her words carried weight beyond comprehension. The recruit swallowed nervously, realizing that this was more than a test of skill. It was a glimpse into a life forged under unimaginable pressure, a life that had demanded every ounce of strength and courage to survive. Dark Angel wasn't just a soldier. She was a force shaped by circumstances few could even imagine. Later, Colonel Hayes called her aside. They walked together toward a quiet corner of the base, away from prying eyes. "I need to know something," he said, his voice low and careful. "Who are you really? Where do you come from?" She stopped, turning to face him fully. Her eyes were dark, reflective, yet unreadable. "Some questions don't have answers that help," she said softly. "What matters is what I do, not who I am. You've seen me in action. That's all that matters." The colonel studied her carefully. He had trained countless operatives, interrogated intelligence agents, and faced danger across the globe, but there was something different about her. He sensed a history that was both extraordinary and dangerous, a past filled with missions that had tested the boundaries of survival, morality, and trust. He realized that whatever she had endured, it had shaped her into someone almost untouchable, someone who could navigate chaos with unparalleled skill. As night fell, she returned to her quarters alone. The walls were sparse, personal effects non-existent. It was clear that she carried nothing with her, not attachments, not reminders of the past, not distractions. She sat quietly on the edge of the cot, her mind replaying the mission brief, the layout of the facility, and every contingency. But beneath the tactical calculations, there was a flicker of memory, a shadow from the past that occasionally surfaced, haunting her. Flashbacks came unbidden. A firefight in a foreign city, explosions that rocked buildings and lives, the loss of teammates she had come to trust implicitly. Faces haunted her, some etched with pain, others frozen in moments of betrayal or failure. She remembered the first time she had realized that the world she had been thrown into didn't reward hesitation, compassion, or even talent. It rewarded survival, adaptability, and ruthlessness. Every choice, every decision, every calculated risk had led her to this moment, standing on the precipice of a mission that could define or destroy her. Her fingers traced the edge of her gear, remembering how each piece had saved her life countless times. Weapons, armor, tools, they weren't just instruments of combat. They were lifelines, extensions of her body and mind. She had learned to trust them implicitly, just as she had learned to trust herself in ways that others could not comprehend. Every mission had reinforced the same lesson: depend on no one completely, trust only your instincts, and accept that pain was inevitable. And yet, despite the intensity of her past, there was a quiet resilience beneath it, a reason she continued to operate, continued to lead, and continued to exist in the shadows. She had lost much, but she had gained a precision, a focus, and an unshakable drive that made her both feared and respected. That combination of loss and skill, trauma and mastery, had forged her into the dark angel she had become, a presence both terrifying and awe-inspiring to those around her. Morning approached, and the base stirred once more. The team began final preparations, checking equipment, synchronizing watches, and running last-minute simulations. Whispers of her past circulated quietly among the operatives, each story more unbelievable than the last. Some claimed she had completed operations solo that would have required entire squads. Others whispered of enemies vanishing without a trace under her watch, intelligence gathered that seemed impossible, and rescues executed with surgical precision. Yet, Dark Angel remained silent, focused, and impenetrable. She moved through the preparations like a shadow, her presence felt rather than spoken. Every eye followed her subtly, every ear tuned to the sound of her footsteps, every mind aware that the coming mission would test them in ways they had never experienced, and that their success would depend on following her lead with unwavering trust. Colonel Hayes, watching from a distance, finally spoke to himself. Whatever she's been through, whatever she's done, it's beyond anything we've seen. And now, it's our lives that are in her hands. And in that quiet moment, as the first rays of sunlight touched the base, the legend of Dark Angel continued to grow. Not just as an operative, but as a living enigma, a shadow from a past that no one could fully understand, yet whose presence shaped the future of every mission she touched. The war room was dimly lit, the only illumination coming from the soft glow of tactical monitors and digital maps projected on the walls. The hum of machinery and the occasional click of a keyboard filled the otherwise silent room. Every operative present had been briefed before, but the atmosphere felt heavier tonight. This mission wasn't just another operation. It was a delicate balance of precision, timing, and deadly stakes. And Dark Angel, as always, commanded attention without raising her voice. Colonel Hayes stood at the head of the table, flanked by a small team of intelligence officers and seasoned special ops veterans. The projected map displayed the target. A rogue organization had seized control of a weapons facility deep in hostile territory. Reports indicated they had a stockpile of highly unstable explosives, and preliminary scans suggested that the facility was heavily fortified. The operation was estimated to be one of the most dangerous the unit had ever faced. Every operative knew that failure could mean disaster on a massive scale. The team gathered around, scanning the map, reviewing satellite imagery, and listening to the intelligence reports. The usual chatter, casual observations, and debates were stifled when Dark Angel stepped closer. She leaned over the holographic display, fingers tracing invisible lines as she analyzed the facility, the terrain, and every possible angle of approach. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, and almost unnervingly precise. "Sector A is compromised," she said quietly, not glancing up. "Cameras are on a rotational delay, but they're predictable. Sector B has a blind spot near the southern wall. Guard rotations are inconsistent in the central corridor. They switch every 13 minutes, not 15. Ventilation ducts in Sector 4 are narrow but stable, though they require careful navigation. Entry through the east wall provides a 3-minute window of uninterrupted access, and the western perimeter is too heavily fortified to risk. The operatives exchanged stunned glances. Many had spent hours analyzing the facility, but Dark Angel's observations revealed details that had gone unnoticed. Even the most seasoned soldiers couldn't hide their surprise at the precision of her analysis. Colonel Hayes stepped closer. "You've already memorized the layout," he said, his voice a mixture of disbelief and respect. "How?" Her eyes finally lifted, dark and unwavering. "I've been where most won't go," she said softly. "I've seen what you can't anticipate. Prediction is a skill, observation a necessity. This mission will test all of it." A young operative spoke up nervously. "Ma'am, this plan is incredibly risky." One misstep," Dark Angel interrupted calmly, "will cost lives. That is why hesitation cannot exist. Confidence in action, precision in movement, and awareness of surroundings are your only guarantees." Her gaze swept across the room, landing on each member of the team. "I will lead. You will follow. The mission succeeds or fails based on our collective execution. There is no room for error, and there is no room for doubt." The weight of her words pressed down on the room. The soldiers felt the intensity radiating from her presence, an unspoken authority that left no room for argument. Her confidence wasn't arrogance. It was born from experience, skill, and countless missions where failure had not been an option. She continued, pointing to the map with precise gestures. "The insertion point is here," she said, indicating the eastern wall. "We will move under cover of darkness, synchronizing watches to 0200 hours. Smoke diversion devices will create a window in the southern corridor, providing 3 uninterrupted minutes to reach the control room. Once inside, 2 objectives: neutralize the explosives and secure intel. Extraction will be via the north exit, coordinated with support teams stationed 2 kilometers from the facility. Timing is everything. Hesitation is death." The room went silent. Every operative felt the gravity of her words. The mission wasn't simply about strategy. It was about flawless execution under pressure, guided by someone who seemed to see every possibility before it occurred. The air felt charged, each heartbeat echoing in the minds of those present. One of the intelligence officers, skeptical yet cautious, asked, "Ma'am, what about contingencies?" Hostile reinforcements could arrive at any moment. Dark Angel's lips curved slightly, but only in the faintest hint of a smile. "Contingencies exist, but only for those who think linearly. We operate in layers, anticipate moves, and adapt before threats materialize. Reinforcements will arrive, will be ready before they even realize the need." Words weren't just tactical advice, they carried a lesson. The operatives felt it deep in their bones. They weren't merely following a plan. They were following someone who had already lived every scenario, survived every threat, and mastered the chaos of unpredictable danger. Colonel Hayes exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly, though unease lingered. "You truly believe this plan will succeed?" he asked. Dark Angel's eyes met his, unflinching. "I don't believe, Colonel. I calculate, I prepare, and I act. Belief is irrelevant in the field. Execution determines outcome." The team's attention shifted back to her as she moved along the projected map, pointing out guard positions, blind spots, and structural weaknesses. Every detail she mentioned was precise, almost surgical, and every suggestion carried an implicit warning. Failure was not an option. A younger recruit whispered to a peer, She's seen this all before, hasn't she?" "Probably," came the quiet reply. But how? No one can know this much without being inside already. Dark Angel's voice cut through the room once more. This is not a lecture. You have 1 hour to prep. Gear checks, weapon synchronization, intel review. Any hesitation will be fatal. Remember, trust the plan, trust your team, and trust me. We leave at 0200 hours. The night will demand everything you have, and every second will matter. The room emptied slowly, operatives moving with nervous energy to prepare for the mission. They had followed many leaders, faced countless dangers, and executed operations across hostile environments. But the quiet authority and calculated confidence of Dark Angel left an impression unlike any they had ever experienced. Every mind was focused, every hand steady, and every heart aware of the stakes ahead. Dark Angel remained behind, reviewing the intel one last time. Her fingers traced the maps, memorizing layouts, guard patterns, and extraction routes. There was a faint shadow in her eyes, a memory of past operations where failure had meant death, but it passed quickly, replaced by calm determination. She understood the mission's danger intimately, yet her composure never faltered. It was as if she carried the weight of countless past failures, transforming them into unshakable precision. As the night deepened, the base fell into an eerie quiet. Soldiers rested, checked gear, and whispered quietly about the upcoming operation. But Dark Angel moved among them silently, ensuring every detail was perfect. She adjusted weapon settings, reviewed communications, and double-checked gear placements. To an observer, it seemed she had anticipated every possible problem, every contingency, every human error. Colonel Hayes watched her from a distance. He had seen elite operatives come and go, but none had commanded attention like this. None had inspired both awe and fear in equal measure. He knew that when the night came, lives would hang in the balance, and the outcome would depend on the figure moving silently through the shadows, calculating, anticipating, and leading with unmatched precision. By midnight, all preparations were complete. Operatives gathered near the staging area, weapons ready, communications synchronized, adrenaline building with each passing minute. And at the center of it all, moving with quiet authority, was Dark Angel. Her presence was both a promise and a warning. She would lead them through the impossible, but only if every eye remained sharp, every hand steady, and every mind focused. As the clock ticked toward 0200 hours, the legend of Dark Angel solidified further. She was no ordinary operative. She was a shadow, a force, a calculated entity that existed beyond conventional limits. The mission ahead would test them all, but with her at the helm, survival and success felt possible, even in the face of overwhelming danger. And in the stillness of the war room, before the darkness descended, she whispered one final word to herself: precision. The mission had begun before anyone had left the base, because in Dark Angel's mind, preparation and anticipation were the first steps to survival. The night had swallowed the horizon, leaving the base bathed in an almost unnatural darkness. The only light came from the faint glimmer of moonlight reflecting off the desert sand and the soft glow of tactical displays in the staging area. Operatives moved with careful precision, shadows blending with the terrain as they prepared for insertion. Every face showed tension and focus, hands gripping weapons, boots crunching quietly on gravel. But the eyes of everyone present repeatedly returned to the figure at the center of it, all Dark Angel. She moved among them like a phantom, adjusting equipment, checking optics, and synchronizing communications. Her movements were deliberate, silent, and unnervingly calm, projecting a confidence that was contagious yet intimidating. Even seasoned operatives, veterans of countless high-risk missions, found themselves instinctively stepping back, sensing the lethal precision contained in her every motion. No one spoke unnecessarily. They didn't dare. Words were for the living, and in her presence, the danger of the night seemed palpable, even before it began. Colonel Hayes approached, lowering his voice. "Are we ready?" he asked. Dark Angel's eyes scanned the perimeter one last time, noting the terrain, the subtle undulations of the desert, and the shadows that could conceal threats. "Ready," she said simply. Her voice was calm, quiet, yet carried a weight that silenced hesitation. She motioned for the team to move forward. The insertion point was a narrow gap in the east wall of the facility, a gap that conventional intelligence suggested was lightly guarded. Yet Dark Angel's calculations had shown vulnerabilities and predictable patterns in the enemy's patrols. As they approached, she led the team through the shadows, moving faster than the eye could follow, but never sacrificing precision. Every step, every movement, every breath was controlled, silent, deliberate. The first encounter came sooner than expected. A pair of guards, oblivious to the team's presence, rounded a corner. Dark Angel's hand signaled the team to halt, her body lowering almost imperceptibly. In a fluid motion, she approached the nearest guard from behind, neutralizing him with practiced efficiency. The second guard barely had time to react before she moved, a shadow among shadows, and he too was incapacitated silently. Her team watched, frozen partly in awe, partly in disbelief. As they advanced, the facility's layout became more complex. Narrow corridors, surveillance cameras, and motion sensors threatened to expose every misstep. Dark Angel anticipated each challenge, guiding the team with subtle gestures and brief, whispered commands. "Left," she murmured, then down the ventilation shaft. Timing, 32 seconds. "Move." The team obeyed, feeling the rhythm of her leadership, every instruction precise, every step calculated. It was almost as if she moved through the space in multiple dimensions at once. Forward, lateral, anticipating threats that had yet to materialize. They began to realize that following her wasn't just about obedience. It was about survival. Hesitation could be fatal. Trust was everything. They reached the central corridor, where security was tightest. The hum of machinery and distant voices reminded them of the stakes. Dark Angel crouched, her eyes scanning, fingers adjusting silencers and weapons. She had already memorized guard rotations, blind spots, and structural weaknesses. As they approached a heavily guarded checkpoint, she whispered, 3, 2, 1 now." In a coordinated move, she and the team neutralized the guards with precision. Movements were synchronized, almost choreographed, each operative acting under her subtle guidance. The alarms didn't trigger. The mission continued without a hitch. Dark Angel moved with quiet authority, a shadow weaving through the night, her presence felt but barely seen. The ventilation shaft became their next obstacle. It was narrow, barely accommodating a single person at a time. The slightest miscalculation could trigger a collapse or alert the enemy. Dark Angel went first, moving through the shaft with a fluid grace that seemed almost supernatural. Her hands traced the edges of the metal, adjusting her path mid-motion, reading every angle and every weakness. Her team followed, guided by her rhythm and instinct. Emerging from the shaft, they found themselves inside the control hub. The facility was dimly lit, the glow of monitors casting eerie shadows on the walls. Dark Angel moved to the main console, quickly analyzing the system. "Explosives secured," she whispered into her com. "Prepare for extraction." Her voice carried both relief and command. Yet even as they completed the task, her eyes scanned constantly, never relaxing, always anticipating. The extraction point was a challenge. Enemy reinforcements could arrive at any moment, and the terrain outside was exposed. Dark Angel calculated the timing perfectly, leading the team through blind spots and shadows, avoiding patrols and security cameras with near-prescient awareness. Every step was executed flawlessly, every movement precise, as though the night itself bent to accommodate her strategy. Midway through the extraction, an unexpected patrol appeared, cutting off their initial route. Panic flickered briefly in the eyes of her team, but not in Dark Angel. She assessed the threat in an instant, calculating angles, timing, and reactions. With a subtle gesture, she guided the team down an alternative path, a narrow service corridor that bypassed the enemy entirely. By the time the patrol noticed, the team was already gone. As they approached the extraction zone, Dark Angel's presence was a steadying force. Her calm, calculated movements reassured the team even as the danger intensified. Bullets whizzed past from distant guards, but she navigated the chaos with lethal efficiency, eliminating threats when necessary, guiding the team without hesitation. Each decision was precise, measured, and executed flawlessly. Finally, they reached the extraction point. Support teams were in position, vehicles ready, and the escape route secured. Dark Angel ensured that every operative was accounted for, scanning the perimeter one last time before giving the final signal. "Move," she commanded, her voice steady. The team boarded the vehicles, adrenaline and relief surging as they departed the facility. As they sped away under the cover of night, operatives glanced back at the facility they had infiltrated, their minds struggling to process what they had just witnessed. Dark Angel remained composed, eyes forward, movements deliberate. She had led them through impossible odds, anticipated every threat, and executed the mission flawlessly. Colonel Hayes, riding alongside the team, finally spoke, voice low but filled with awe. "I've trained with the best," he said quietly, "but never anyone like her. She's extraordinary." Dark Angel didn't respond immediately. Her eyes were scanning, calculating, already anticipating what could come next. Her mind moved faster than anyone else's, always preparing for the next contingency. And in that moment, everyone realized something profound. She wasn't just a leader. She was a force of nature, a shadow in the night, a protector and strategist whose presence alone shifted the balance of life and death. By the time they reached a safe distance, the facility was behind them, yet the mission's intensity lingered. Her team was exhilarated, exhausted, and profoundly changed. They had followed her through chaos and danger, and emerged alive. And though none of them fully understood the depth of her skills or the weight of her past, they had witnessed something unforgettable, a phantom in the night, guiding them through darkness with unparalleled precision. And as the desert wind whispered through the night, carrying dust and shadows across the terrain, Dark Angel remained at the center of it all, unseen yet undeniable. A legend in motion, a force that had entered their lives and left an indelible mark. The mission was a success, but it was only a glimpse of the power, precision, and unshakable presence of the operative who had simply whispered her call sign into existence. Dark Angel. The desert air was thick with the scent of dust and adrenaline as the team made their way toward the rendezvous point. The mission had been executed with flawless precision, yet the tension was far from over. Somewhere beyond the dunes, enemy patrols were undoubtedly mobilizing, alerted by the faint disturbances left in their wake. Every operative's senses were on high alert, each step calculated to avoid exposure. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the soft hum of engines and the distant whisper of the wind. Dark Angel moved at the front, her silhouette a sharp, controlled shadow against the pale moonlight. Every movement was deliberate, a symphony of calculated steps that drew the team into her rhythm. They followed instinctively, a mixture of awe and trust guiding them. But even as they advanced, an uneasy feeling crept through the squad. Something was off. The air seemed charged, the shadows deeper, and every rustle carried a hint of unseen danger. Then it came an unexpected explosion near the extraction point. A trap laid by the rogue faction as a last-ditch attempt to reclaim control. The ground shuddered beneath them, sand and debris spraying into the air. Operatives instinctively hit the ground, weapons raised, scanning for threats. Bullets ricocheted off rocks, and distant shouts signaled enemy reinforcements converging rapidly. The meticulously planned escape had become chaotic, a storm of danger threatening to overwhelm even the most skilled soldiers. Dark Angel's eyes narrowed, scanning the environment with lightning speed. She assessed the explosion, the approaching patrols, and the narrow paths leading to safety. In an instant, she recalculated their route, adjusting the team's movement with subtle hand signals and whispered instructions. Left flank, follow me. 2 seconds between steps. Keep low. Move. Her presence was magnetic. Every operative felt the invisible weight of her confidence, the unshakable calm that seemed almost impossible amidst the chaos. They obeyed, moving as one unit, guided by her intuition and strategy. But just as they thought they were navigating the danger successfully, a new threat emerged, a heavily armed vehicle cutting across their path, tires grinding against sand, engine roaring like a predator. Without hesitation, Dark Angel assessed the vehicle's trajectory. Now, she commanded, her voice cutting through the cacophony. She led the team in a coordinated evasive maneuver, rolling into cover, sliding behind rocks, and using the terrain to their advantage. Bullets pinged off nearby surfaces, dust and sand obscuring vision. Yet she moved with a precision that was almost supernatural, always one step ahead of the danger. The team followed, but the chaos began to separate them. Young operatives stumbled, exhausted and shaken, while the veterans struggled to maintain formation. Dark Angel paused briefly, scanning the perimeter with sharp, calculating eyes. The extraction vehicles were still visible in the distance, but the path to them was fraught with deadly obstacles. Enemy reinforcements were closing in, their numbers increasing with terrifying speed. Then, in a move that stunned everyone, she turned to the team. You make it to the vehicles. I'll clear the path. Her voice was calm, resolute, almost detached. The team hesitated. This was not protocol, not procedure. But they had learned from experience that hesitation in the presence of Dark Angel was fatal. Nodding reluctantly, they moved toward the vehicles, trusting her implicitly, even as she disappeared into the shadows ahead. She advanced alone, a ghost among chaos. Bullets ricocheted around her, explosions rocked the ground, yet she moved like a shadow, silent and deadly. Each enemy she encountered was neutralized with surgical precision, incapacitated or eliminated before they could react. Her movements were fluid, almost too fast to follow, each step calculated to maintain both her safety and the team's. She became an unseen force, a living phantom whose presence dictated the flow of battle. Meanwhile, the team reached the extraction point, adrenaline surging. They glanced back, expecting to see her, but the shadows behind them were empty. Panic flickered briefly in their eyes, but the comms crackled to life. Move! Her voice, calm and commanding, echoed through their earpieces, guiding them even from unseen positions. It was as if she were everywhere and nowhere at once. Minutes stretched like hours as they drove toward the relative safety of the extraction zone. Behind them, the facility faded into darkness, but the enemy was still in pursuit. The team tried to follow the path she had cleared, yet despite their focus, no one could locate her amidst the chaos. It was as if she had vanished entirely, leaving only the echo of her presence behind. Colonel Hayes, riding alongside the team, muttered under his breath, "She's gone." Just like that. No one responded, each operative too focused on the escape. Yet the realization settled in slowly. Dark Angel had disappeared in the middle of the mission, leaving them to complete the extraction with only the trace of her guidance. The notion was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. The final leg of the journey was tense. Enemy patrols were relentless, but the path she had carved remained viable. They reached a narrow canyon where the terrain provided cover, and from there, they could reach the extraction vehicles safely. Dark Angel's earlier maneuvers had ensured their success, yet her absence was palpable. They had survived because of her, but she was nowhere to be found. Back at the base, the team recounted the events in stunned detail. Every operative spoke of her precision, her foresight, and the almost supernatural way she had led them through danger. Yet no one could explain her disappearance. Surveillance footage was inconclusive. She had moved too fast, too efficiently. It was as if she had been a shadow, a ghost, a dark angel who existed only in fleeting glimpses. Colonel Hayes sat quietly, reviewing the reports. "She's gone," he murmured. "No trace, no explanation. But we survived because of her." Every life, every moment, she controlled the chaos. Even as he spoke, he understood something fundamental. Dark Angel wasn't bound by ordinary rules, and her methods were beyond comprehension. The mission's success had been orchestrated by someone who existed almost entirely outside the constraints of conventional operation. Whispers spread through the base like wildfire. Operatives spoke of her vanishing act, each story more unbelievable than the last. Some claimed she had melded with the shadows, others that she had anticipated the enemy's every move before they even appeared. Every recounting reinforced the legend of Dark Angel, a phantom operative whose skill and presence were unmatched, and whose disappearance was as enigmatic as her arrival. In the quiet hours after the mission, Colonel Hayes stood at the edge of the compound, staring into the night. Somewhere beyond the dunes, she had disappeared. He had no idea where, no idea how, and no expectation of ever finding her. Yet one thing was certain: the lives of his team, the success of the mission, and the survival of every operative depended on her extraordinary intervention. And as the wind swept across the desert, carrying sand, dust, and whispers of danger, the legend of Dark Angel grew. She had arrived silently, led flawlessly, and vanished without a trace. She was a shadow in the night, a force of precision and lethal skill, and a presence that could neither be predicted nor controlled. Her story, like the darkness itself, remained elusive, forever haunting, forever commanding, forever unforgettable. The dawn broke over the desert, washing the base in pale gold light. Silence dominated the air, punctuated only by the distant hum of generators and the occasional radio chatter. The team had returned from the mission physically intact, but emotionally changed. Every operative carried an unspoken reverence for what they had witnessed and for the one who had guided them through it. Dark Angel, the operative whose whispered call sign had begun as a shadow and now loomed as legend, had vanished as mysteriously as she had arrived. Colonel Hayes moved through the debriefing room, observing his team. Faces showed relief, exhaustion, and awe. They recounted every detail, replaying the night in their minds, the precision, the foresight, the near-superhuman agility of the operative who had led them through chaos. Even in her absence, her presence was palpable, etched into the memory of every movement, every decision, every breath taken in the darkness. One of the younger operatives, still shaken, raised a hand. "Sir, she saved all of us. How? How could one person do all that?" Hayes paused, taking a deep breath. "She's not like any operative we've ever trained with. Not like anyone will ever train with. Her skill isn't just experience, it's instinct, calculation, and a lifetime shaped by circumstances none of us can imagine." He let the words hang, the weight of truth pressing against the walls of the room. Stories began to spread through the ranks, each more incredible than the last. Soldiers spoke of her as if she were a myth, yet they knew she had been real. A figure who had moved through impossible scenarios with lethal precision, orchestrating success from the edge of chaos. Dark Angel had vanished during extraction, but the results she left behind were undeniable. 0 casualties, mission accomplished, and every operative alive to tell the tale. Hayes sat at his desk later, reviewing reports, maps, and communications. He couldn't shake the image of her disappearing into the shadows during the mission's most dangerous moments. She had separated herself intentionally, leaving only subtle guidance to ensure survival. No conventional operative could have pulled that off. He knew that her absence was deliberate, a statement of her autonomy, skill, and untraceable presence. She wasn't just leading missions, she was defining them on her own terms. In the days following the operation, the base began to settle into normalcy, yet the legend of Dark Angel persisted. Every time a new mission briefing began, whispers circulated, stories of her strategies, her vanishing acts, her precision. She became more than an operative. She became a symbol of what could be accomplished when skill, instinct, and courage intersected at the highest level. She had inspired a standard of excellence, a level of awareness that no ordinary training could replicate. Meanwhile, somewhere beyond the base, beyond the reach of satellites and patrols, Dark Angel moved silently through a landscape unknown to anyone else. Her thoughts were private, her movements deliberate. She had no need for recognition, no desire for glory. Her mission was completion, not acknowledgement. Every step she took reinforced the myth she had created, a shadow in the night, a guide through chaos, a force of precision that could not be predicted or contained. In the minds of those she led, however, she was permanent. Her strategies, her leadership, and her uncanny ability to anticipate danger became a teaching tool, a standard against which all future operations would be measured. Soldiers studied her movements, tried to replicate her calm focus, and trained in her absence as though preparing for her to return. Each recounting of her actions reinforced a truth. She was more than an operative. She was a living lesson in courage, skill, and instinct. Colonel Hayes reflected on the enormity of what had occurred. He had seen elite soldiers, battle-hardened operatives, and top-tier intelligence agents, but none had commanded such silent authority. None had moved through danger with such complete control. She had arrived quietly, executed flawlessly, and vanished without explanation, leaving the world slightly altered in her wake. Her legacy was already cemented in the minds of those she had led. Reports of the rogue facility's destruction circulated through intelligence channels, each mentioning the success without casualties, a feat considered impossible under ordinary circumstances. Analysts and commanders marveled at the operation, speculating on how such precision had been achieved. Yet the truth was known to only a few. The orchestrator had been Dark Angel. Her presence had been unseen, her methods untraceable, and her impact undeniable. Back at the base, the operatives continued training, planning, and preparing for the next mission. They moved with renewed focus, a newfound understanding of what was required to survive and succeed in their line of work. And though Dark Angel was gone, her influence persisted in every calculated move, every disciplined breath, and every silent assessment of the battlefield. She had imparted more than strategy. She had imparted a mindset. In quiet moments, Hayes would glance toward the horizon where she had disappeared, half expecting to see her silhouette emerge from the shadows. But she never appeared. And perhaps that was the point. Dark Angel had never existed to be found. She existed to redefine the limits of skill, courage, and survival. The world had glimpsed her brilliance, and that glimpse was enough to alter the trajectory of every operative who had followed her. Legends grew. Soldiers began leaving notes in briefing rooms, scribbling call signs and strategies inspired by her methods. Young operatives whispered stories of the Phantom, who moved like a shadow, struck with surgical precision, and vanished without a trace. The name Dark Angel became synonymous not with fear, but with respect, mastery, and an almost mythic presence that transcended conventional understanding. Years later, after countless operations, missions, and briefings, the story of Dark Angel persisted. Veterans would recount the night in the desert, describing the operative who had arrived silently, led flawlessly, and vanished without acknowledgement. They spoke of her as though she were more than human, a presence that defied conventional explanation. And yet, they all knew the truth. She was real. She had existed. She had shaped their lives, saved them from chaos, and left them with a standard of excellence that could never be erased. Colonel Hayes, older now, would sometimes stand alone, reflecting on that mission and the operative who had defined it. He never stopped wondering about her origins, her past, or her future. Yet he understood that some questions were never meant to be answered. Dark Angel had chosen her path, moved with precision, and disappeared on her own terms. Her story was complete, but her legacy was eternal. In the quiet, under the endless sky, Dark Angel's presence lingered not as a figure to be found, but as a force that had shaped those who had been fortunate enough to witness her. A whisper in the night, a shadow that moved unseen, a dark angel whose name would be spoken with reverence, awe, and unshakable respect for generations to come. The world had glimpsed a legend, and that legend had vanished, leaving only the memory of brilliance, the echo of courage, and the indelible mark of a true phantom of the night.